I'm Hugh Stewart. This is News for Scotland on the Scotland Channel. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar has come under fire for saying that the UK government should not allow a Scottish independence referendum even if pro-independence parties win the Scottish elections next year. Mr Sarwar said during a TV interview, "I don't support an independence referendum, I don't support independence." But SNP's member of the Scottish Parliament, Stuart McMillan, said it's not for Anna Sarwar, Keir Starmer or the Labour Party to determine the future of Scotland. Labour's attitude to self-determination seems to be hardening these days. Previously, pro-union parties in the UK have always accepted that Scotland is a country and one which allegedly joined a voluntary union with England. Clearly, if Scotland made its own decision to enter into a political union, it must have the right to leave again. Before the independence referendum of 2014, leaders of all three unionist parties here issued a statement saying, "Power lies with the Scottish people, and we believe it's for the Scottish people to decide how we are governed." But perhaps fearing that they would lose a referendum if one was held now, the UK Labour government in England appears to be hardening its stance and seems prepared to override the democratic wishes of the Scottish people. Former Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May wrote in 2019 that the union rests on the support of its people and will endure as long as the people want it to. And Margaret Thatcher, never popular in Scotland, accepted that if Scotland voted for independence, no English party or politician would stand in their way, although they all have since then. Is Sir Keir Starmer worried that if he agreed to an independence referendum, he might go down in history as a Prime Minister who lost Scotland? Can Scotland overrule London and take our case for independence straight to the United Nations? Well, we have a story on that coming up, so keep watching. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar has confirmed he is submitting his application to be Scotland's First Minister, and he expects his party to win the 2026 Scottish Parliament elections. This is despite polls which show Labour in Scotland is currently a long way behind the SNP and may not even come second, with Nigel Farage's right-wing Reform UK party on the rise. Sarwar told his party conference last week that the Scottish Labour government would continue left-of-centre policies such as free prescription charges, free university tuition and the Scottish Child Payment, all introduced by the SNP administrations, although none of these are being promised by Labour in England. He did not mention Labour's broken promises on winter fuel payments for pensioners, nor promises made to the WASPy women either. He attacked the SNP, who have governed Scotland either on their own or with other parties since 2007, claiming the SNP is tired, divided and out of ideas. He also attacked the SNP on health service waiting times, despite those being worse in England. Mr Sarwar promised that if he gets the FM job, an early step will be to declare a national waiting times emergency. Sarwar, a qualified dentist, said that almost 1 in 6 Scots is on an NHS waiting list and GP appointments are like gold dust. He also said that thousands are stuck in hospitals, although they could leave if there was someone at home to look after them. Is Labour exaggerating the NHS crisis in Scotland? The Talking Up Scotland blog argues that, although numbers collected in different ways in different countries make it hard to compare, waiting times do seem to be longer in Wales and England, where the health services are run by Labour. And last autumn, ex-MP Dr Philippa Whitford, herself a retired NHS surgeon, revealed statistics from a Freedom of Information request confirming that the Scottish NHS does indeed have better waiting time outcomes than England and Wales. At the conference last week, Sarwar's deputy Jackie Baillie, MSP, was accused of misleading people with an account of a patient death in a hospital corridor, implying that it happened here, when actually this regrettable incident actually took place in England. In a documentary to be shown on the Scotland Channel from the 6th of March, we examine how Scotland's NHS is being undermined by spending decisions made in England, and how the relentless push by the government in England to privatise the health service for profit presents a real threat to Scotland's NHS as a universal healthcare system free at the point of use. Don't miss this fascinating look into Scotland's NHS, which airs from Thursday the 6th of March, exclusively here on the Scotland Channel. This week saw the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Scotland's First Minister John Swinney has supported the stance taken by the rest of Europe in condemning Russia's actions. The resulting war has caused over 1 million casualties. In December, Politica website reported that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed and 370,000 wounded. This compares with at least 600,000 dead and wounded on the Russian side. First Minister John Swinney attended a ceremony at Scotland's War Memorial in Edinburgh on Monday last to honour those who had been killed. At the event, the First Minister said, "We stand with the people of Ukraine and are committed to maintaining that country's territorial integrity." Although Scotland has no official voice on the world stage with all foreign policy decisions made by the UK government and England, the Scottish Government has sent medical aid to Ukraine and helped thousands of Ukrainian citizens into Scotland under the UK's Super Sponsor scheme. Critics of Europe's policy in support of Ukraine argue that the West had continually goaded Russia by allowing NATO's expansion up to Russia's borders in contravention of a 1990 agreement given to then Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. However, the Soviet Union was never offered a formal guarantee on the limits of NATO's expansion post-1990, but Russia nonetheless cites this as a reason for their invasion and illegal occupation of Ukrainian territory. Earlier this week, the United Nations voted for a resolution from Ukraine and the European Union denouncing Russia as the aggressor state and calling on them to remove their troops from Ukrainian territory. But with Trump in the White House, the US policy has done a U-turn away from support for Ukraine to support for Russia. The US, in a move which is possibly a first, joined with Russia, Belarus and North Korea in opposing the European policy. Nonetheless, the resolution passed with 93 countries in support, 93 in support and 18 against. America's stance is seen as an example of the Trump White House switching away from Europe in favour of closer ties to the Putin regime in Moscow. Salvo, the organisation behind the bid to challenge the UK's status through the international courts, says that many United Nations member states are sympathetic to Scotland's cause. That was a claim of Salvo's Sarah Salyers following last week's announcement that Salvo is working with a Geneva-based human rights organisation, Justice pour tous International, that's JPTI, to prepare a submission to the United Nations Special Committee on Decolonisation. JPTI's role is to ensure that the submission meets UN procedural requirements and aligns with international legal standards for recognition under the decolonisation framework. If the submission is considered, JPTI will present the legal and procedural case for Scotland's recognition at the UN, relying on precedents set by other territories that have successfully been placed on the UN's list of non-self-governing territories. Sarah Salyers said to us that many UN member states are unaware of the facts about so-called voluntary union with England and many of the wrongs committed against Scotland by England. The JPTI's UN submission will focus on Scotland's distinct legal identity and history, which sets it apart from the rest of the UK as a whole, the clear historic, constitutional and legal evidence that the British state's representation of Scotland as a voluntary party in union with England is false, as is England's claim that Scotland is not a dependency. The submission will also point to clear markers of colonisation here, especially the wrongful removal of Scotland's resources without the consent of the owners, the people of Scotland, and the impoverishment of Scotland for the enrichment of the English metropolitan capital. Salvo claims that a lack of genuine self-governance, as Westminster retains control over the constitutional, economic, cultural and political matters that affect Scotland's future, and points to the international legal obligations of the United Kingdom to uphold the right to self-determination as enshrined in UK resolutions and customary international law. The submission will make comparisons with past UN decolonisation cases such as Tokelau from New Zealand and New Caledonia from France, where similar legal arguments were successfully used to place these territories on the UN's decolonisation agenda. The initiative, according to Salvo, is part of the broader effort to engage with UN member states civil society organisations and human rights mechanisms to ensure that Scotland's independent decolonisation claim receives international recognition. While Westminster has recognised that Scots are sovereign and have the right to decide their own future, UK parties, including the current Labour government, continue to block the right of Scotland to hold a referendum, saying now is not the time, but refusing to say when the right time will ever be. All colonies share the same clear features of oppression and suffer similar cruelties and injustices. Scotland shares in every one of these features and has suffered the same injustices, according to Sarah Salyers. Some of these cruelties and injustices are now historic, many are contemporary and continue today, with the oppression of Scots becoming institutionalised in what is a colonial society. She says colonialism involves primarily economic plunder of the territory, external political control and population displacement. Colonialism is also based on psychology, and here the process of cultural imperialism, including cultural assimilation, aims to alter the identity of a people, i.e. to make the Scots feel more British or English. All these and other clear features of colonial oppression are visible in Scotland and have been since the annexation of 1707, she said. With antisocial behaviour crimes on the rise UK-wide, we're glad to report a big fall in this sort of crime in Scotland. 10 years ago, figures for this sort of crime, including things like threatening and abusive behaviour, were 208 a year. But last year, 23-24, the number was down to 88, a massive fall of nearly 60%. Crime levels in general have been falling over the last 20 years, while many crimes, including antisocial behaviour, rioting and knife crime, are on the increase in England. It's worth noting this increase south of the border began a couple of years into the last Conservative government. It's difficult to measure crime levels because some are not reported to the police. To get better information, the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey has been assessing people's experience of crime since 2008, and in general, crime here is down. To take one example, the figures for 21-22 show a 58% drop in violent crime compared with 2008-2009. The way people perceive crime is also going in the right direction. The proportion of people feeling safe as they walk home through the area is also higher than it was in 2008. Unfortunately, the same isn't true for the rest of the UK. While crime levels are low and in fact falling in Scotland and Northern Ireland, they are increasing in England and Wales, and so is people's concern about crime there. Mainstream news reports often describe crime levels or civil disturbance as if they were happening equally throughout the UK, but that's misleading. The UK riots, for example, following the disgraceful murder of young girls in Southport last year, did not happen in Scotland. It's important to investigate why these events occurred in different ways in different countries, and so to start, they have to be reported properly. If Scotland's doing something right, surely our friends south of the border should see if they could learn from us and start to tackle their growing social crisis. The Scottish whisky industry and Scotland's First Minister John Swinney have slammed the UK government in England after it unveiled plans to allow English whisky makers to use the term single malt. Under proposals being considered by the UK government, single malt English whisky could be the term used for the spirit made by a single distillery in England. However, the Scottish Whisky Association says it devalues single malts because it claims the English method would be simpler than the process used in Scotland. A spokesperson for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, said that no decisions have been made yet and the application process was ongoing. Under the proposal for English single malt whisky, the drink would only be required to be distilled at one site, while mashing and fermentation could take place elsewhere. It's feared that allowing the English industry to use the term for its alcohol would damage the integrity of the single malt category, and with it the reputation of the Scottish whisky industry. Mary Gudgeon, Scotland's Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, said any programme to undermine the reputation or definition of the term single malt could have a devastating effect on our iconic whisky industry and would be wholly unacceptable. She said that the industry was of huge economic importance to Scotland and exported £5.4 billion worth of goods last year. The New Scotland Party founder Peter Bell said, "It seems that not a day passes without news of another measure designed to undermine Scotland in some way." Thanks for finding us on the Scotland channel. If you like what we're doing, you can help. First, please like and share our videos, and it helps us too if you simply subscribe to the channel. Just click, it doesn't cost you anything. We also love to read your comments, so please keep those coming in. And if you or someone you know wants to be part of Scotland's growing independent media, why not talk to us? Find the website on www.thescotlandchannel.tv or write to me on n4s@mail.com. Thanks. And now on with the news. The Scottish Government is launching a public consultation on getting rid of the two-child benefit cap, and you're invited to give your opinion. The policy was brought in by George Osborne, the UK Finance Minister, in 2017. It meant that certain welfare benefits can be paid to families with one or two children, but with no increase for any more children after that. The Conservative theory was that the best way out of poverty is to work. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but Osborne assumed that reducing state benefits would incentivise the worst off to go and get jobs to improve things for the family. Did it work? No. There's plenty of evidence that Osborne's hunch in fact resulted in more poverty. A recent study from London School of Economics showed that employment levels among families affected have not changed, and there's also no sign of any change in the birth rates. Since the new Labour government chose to keep the two benefit cap last autumn, the Scottish Government has decided to take steps to reduce the harm it does to poorer families here in Scotland. As it's a UK-wide measure, the Scottish Government's powers are limited, but they want to find an effective way of using Scotland's funding to reduce the damage. The Child Poverty Action Group estimates that scrapping the two-child cap in Scotland could lift 15,000 children out of poverty. The consultation is seeking views from the public and from stakeholders about the most effective ways to put systems in place here to mitigate the effects of the two-child cap. It asks views and questions such as whether Social Security Scotland should administer a top-up payment. The consultation period ends on the 18th of April, and details are on the Scottish Government website. With Scotland's only oil refinery set to close in the summer with a loss of 400 jobs and thousands more in the supply sectors, the Scottish Government has announced it's putting an extra £25 million into Project Willow, aimed at finding new green jobs at the site. Redundancy notices already went out 2 weeks ago following the decision which was made back in 2023 to close this refinery, which many suspect is designed to make Scotland the only oil producing nation in the UK artificially dependent on England, which has 5 oil refineries, none of which is marked for closure. Oil from Scotland will now be refined in England and sent back to Scotland to supply Scottish customers with petrol, diesel and aviation fuels. Another protest is set to take place outside the Grangemouth headquarters of INEOS, the site's owner, on Saturday. Sensing political fallout from the decision, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK Government in England, told last weekend's Scottish Labour conference he was offering £200 million towards the Green Jobs Pledge. While Starmer talked about the bioengineering, biofuel and hydrogen sectors as possible new industries, none of these is even at the planning stage yet. That did not stop Anas Sarwar claiming this is a significant announcement to secure the future of Grangemouth, but all those highly skilled jobs will be long gone before any new industry takes off. The Keep Grangemouth Working Campaign and Unite Trade Union staged a protest at a Labour Scottish conference last week, leaving 400 hard hats at the conference entrance to mark those jobs which have gone for good. Labour MP for Alloa and Grangemouth, Brian Leishman, who campaigned to save the refinery when he got elected last year, said it was so wrong that the owners were given £600 million to move to Belgium, while its major shareholder is going to get UK government cash to reconstruct Old Trafford for his hobby football team, Man United. The Keep Grangemouth Working Campaign is still demanding that Labour keep the promise that Anas Sarwar made before the election that he would save the Grangemouth jobs. Protesters from the Unite Union say they have a plan to keep Grangemouth working by converting the plant to refine sustainable aviation fuel. Saturday's protest by the independence campaign group Scottish Resistance takes place between 12 noon and 1 p.m. outside the INEOS headquarters in Grangemouth. And that rounds up our stories for this week. Join us again from 7 p.m. next Friday for independent news without the mainstream media bias. Support us by subscribing to the Scotland channel on youtube.com/the Scotland channel. I'm Hugh, thanks for watching.